All right, get ready, because today we're diving into a phrase that's equal parts strange and thought-provoking. Thinking about the immortality of the crab.
You know, when you sent this in, I have to say it really piqued my interest. It does have a surreal ring to it, doesn't it?
It really does. And we've got a ton of great material to dig into, literature, a bit of philosophy, even a film, all hinting at how much weight this phrase carries culturally. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics. What does thinking about the immortality of the crab even mean?
Okay, picture this. You're staring out the window, totally lost in thought, and someone asks what you're thinking about. And instead of nothing, you say, maybe with a little smirk, oh, just pondering the immortality of the crab. It's that feeling of playful thought, usually about something absurd, something you can't really answer.
So it's not just daydreaming, but a very particular kind of mental wandering where you're playing with a thought that's kind of wonderfully pointless to actually figure out.
Exactly. It's the kind of thinking that doesn't lead you to a neat conclusion, you know? More like it opens up a space for amusement, curiosity, maybe even a little existential wonder. And the fascinating thing is, this very specific mental state is captured perfectly in a phrase common in Spanish-speaking cultures. Pensar en la inmortalidad del cangrejo.
It's amazing how language can capture these abstract experiences, isn't it?
Oh.
So do we know where this phrase originated? Like, is there some old text where someone first said these words?
Well, unfortunately, the sources we have don't give us a clear origin story. Seems to be one of those sayings passed down through generations, changing right along with the culture, like finding a linguistic fossil. It gives us a glimpse into how humor and thought have been connected over time. What do you think this says about language itself, about how it reflects a culture's values?
That's a great question. Makes me think that humor, especially this kind of absurdist humor, it's not just about making people laugh. It's about pointing out the paradoxes of life, the things we can't explain but can't help but think about.
Exactly. And this phrase, thinking about the immortality of the crab, it's not just limited to casual conversations. It's made its way into literature, philosophy, even film.
Oh, I like where this is going. Let's hear that first literary example. What do we have?
Let's go all the way back to 1855 to a book called Los Mexicanos Pintados por sí mismos. That's Mexicans Painted by Themselves. It's a collection of essays, and in one of them, this phrase just pops up in a dialogue, just like we might use it today.
Wow, so it's been around for a while.
It really shows how deeply ingrained this idea is in Spanish-speaking cultures. But let's jump forward now to the 20th century to the work of José Emilio Pacheco, the Mexican poet.
Poetry. I do love a little lyrical exploration.
Well, Pacheco actually wrote a poem called Inmortalidad del cangrejo, Immortality of the crab. And he's not just using the phrase, he's really wrestling with the ideas behind it, the literal and figurative meanings of a crab's immortality.
Okay, unpack that a bit for me. What do you mean by literal versus figurative here?
Good question. On a literal level, you have the crab's molting process, shedding its shell to reveal a new one underneath. It's like a biological kind of renewal, a cycle of death and rebirth. But Pacheco, he doesn't stop there. He wants us to think about the crab's immortality on a much larger scale.
You mean like the immortality of the entire species, the way crabs have been around for millions of years, outlasting so many other creatures?
Exactly. And he takes it even further, suggesting that even our individual actions, the tiny ripples we make in the world, they all contribute to this huge interconnected tapestry of existence. So maybe, just maybe, our own immortality isn't about living forever, but about the impact we have, the way our lives weave into this grand narrative of the universe, just like a crab's existence is woven into the ecosystem of the beach.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful way to look at it. Like our thoughts, our actions, they all become part of something so much bigger than ourselves, even if we can't see the full picture.
Exactly. And it's interesting you say that because even Miguel de Unamuno, the Spanish philosopher known for tackling these huge questions of existence and meaning, he even mentions the immortality of the crab in his work. He even mentions the immortality of the crab in his work.
Really? I gotta say, I haven't read a ton of Unamuno.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of philosophical ideas did he usually focus on?
Well, he was really into this idea of finding meaning in a world that can seem pretty meaningless, you know? He thought a lot about faith and reason, the search for personal truth, all those big questions that keep people up at night.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So where does the immortality of the crab fit into all of that? Seems kind of like a strange idea for a serious philosopher to be thinking about.
That's what makes it so interesting, right? Like, our sources don't actually give us a specific Unamuno quote or anything, but just the fact that he mentions this phrase that seems so lighthearted it makes you think it must resonated with him somehow.
Hmm.
Maybe he saw it as, I don't know, like a metaphor for how humans try to find meaning even when faced with the absurd.
That makes sense. It's like those little moments when you're wondering about something, those what-if questions.
Hmm.
They might actually be important for understanding who we are and where we fit in the universe.
Exactly. And this phrase doesn't just stop with philosophy and poetry.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The Bolivian
Of
film.
the film, yeah.
Okay, remind me, what was the title again?
It's called Senequina, la inmortalidad del cangrejo, which you could translate as Senequina, the immortality of the crab. It came out in 2005.
Okay, a whole film named after this phrase. That's pretty wild. Makes you wonder what kind of story they told, right?
Yeah.
Like, did they really get into existential crab stuff?
Yeah, our sources don't really give us much about the plot itself.
Okay,
But even without knowing the specifics, the fact that they chose that title is really telling, don't you think?
totally. It's like they knew this phrase would speak to people, you know?
Mm.
It has that feeling of contemplation, maybe even a little sadness. I don't know.
Exactly. It's become bigger than just a phrase at this point. It's like a cultural touchstone, a shortcut to a specific feeling or idea.
Like those inside jokes you have with your friends, they only make sense because of a shared experience.
Yes, exactly.
So we've talked about the meaning, the origins. We even took a quick tour through literature, philosophy, and film.
Right, right.
That was a lot.
It's amazing how this one little phrase, thinking about the immortality of the crab, has taken on a life of its own. It reflects the cultures and the minds that have embraced it.
It really makes you realize that sometimes the most insightful ideas come from the most unexpected places. It's like finding a hidden door in a room you thought you knew.
I like that, yeah.
And what's behind that door? Well, that's for each person to discover on their own, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of discoveries, I think it's time to get back to that final thought we were talking about earlier. The idea of each of us finding our own personal immortality of the crab.
Oh, I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, you're right.
It's one thing to analyze how other people have used this phrase, but what does it actually mean for us, for the person listening right now, in this moment?
That's really the core of this whole deep dive, isn't it? It's realizing that everyone has those immortality of the crab moments, those times when a seemingly random thought takes your mind on a little adventure.
So it's not really about crabs at all.
Right.
It's about what the crab represents. Those moments of playful thinking, asking questions that don't need answers, but just spark a sense of wonder.
Exactly. So, like, next time you're lost in thought, maybe you're staring out the window or watching a spider build a web or something, ask yourself, what's my version of the crab's immortality?
What little question sends my mind down a rabbit hole? What captures that same feeling of fun curiosity, that feeling of exploring the edges of what I think I know? It's like we all have these immortality of the crab questions just waiting to be found.
Yeah, exactly. And those questions, they tell us something unique about ourselves, right? Like how our minds work, what we're drawn to. They're like little glimpses into our inner
I
worlds.
like that.
Yeah.
So it's not even about finding the answer, really. It's about the fun of exploring, letting your curiosity be your guide.
Exactly. Embrace those moments when you're off in your own little world, thinking about something that might not make sense to anyone else.
Hmm.
You never know. You might just discover something new about yourself, about the world, about, I don't know, even about existence itself.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. It's amazing how one phrase, thinking about the immortality of the crab, can lead to so many different paths of exploration, language, culture, philosophy, even just personal reflection.
Yeah, it really is.
It really shows you the power of words,
Absolutely.
how they can spark curiosity and connect us to these bigger ideas.
For sure.
Well, huge thank you to you, our expert, for taking us on this deep dive with you today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you and everyone listening.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey into the unexpected. Remember, the next time you find your mind wandering off on some tangent, some rabbit hole of questions that don't seem to have answers, you might just be thinking about the immortality of the crab. And that is a beautiful thing. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those immortality of the crab thoughts alive.